The restaurant was packed that night, laughter echoing across every table, plates clinking, servers moving fast between chairs, the warm glow of lights giving everything a polished, expensive feel. A black man stepped inside calmly, no loud entrance, no attitude, just quiet confidence. He looked around once, adjusted his jacket, and walked to the host stand. "Table for one, please," he said politely. The host barely looked up from the screen. A quick scan of the room, a pause that lasted a second too long. Then a forced smile that didn't reach the eyes. "I'm sorry. We're fully booked tonight." The man didn't react immediately. He turned slightly, and behind him the truth was obvious. Empty tables near the window. At least 3 booths unoccupied. 2 tables in the corner completely open, and a couple of servers standing idle near the back. He noticed everything. The host noticed him noticing, and quickly added, "We can put you on a wait list. Maybe 2 hours." But the tone said something else entirely. The man nodded slowly. "I see," he said quietly. No argument, no confrontation. Just acceptance. He stepped back, turned, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft chime. Inside the restaurant, the energy returned quickly, laughter, conversation, music, but something subtle lingered near the host's stand, a moment that passed too fast for most people to care about. But the manager had seen it from across the room, and chose not to intervene. Outside, the man stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching his reflection in the glass. Then he pulled out his phone and made a single call. "It's done," he said simply. 3 words, then he walked away. No one in that restaurant knew who he was. Not really to them. He was just another customer. But in reality, he wasn't just anyone. He was someone who had spent the last year quietly studying the restaurant industry from the inside: investors, supply chains, staffing costs, property ownership structures, everything most people never think about when they sit down to eat. And this restaurant was not just a place he visited, it was part of a plan. 3 days earlier, in a high-rise office downtown, the same man sat across from a group of investors, a folder open in front of him. "I want the property next to Mason's Grill," he said calmly. One of the investors raised an eyebrow. "That's prime location, but it's owned by a strong group. They don't sell easily." The man nodded. "I know." Another investor leaned forward. "Why that place?" He paused, then said, "Because they don't respect people they think don't belong there." The room went quiet. Not because of anger, but because of certainty. They understood exactly what he meant. Deals like this don't move fast, they move quietly. Over conversations, over paperwork, over timing, and over leverage. 2 days later, the offer was accepted. Not because it was the highest, but because it was structured in a way the owners couldn't ignore, and now the deal was complete. But the restaurant staff didn't know that yet. The next evening, business continued as usual inside Mason's Grill. Same hosts, same manager, same tables, same patterns, until the email arrived. The manager opened it casually at first, then stopped reading halfway through. His face changed. He reread it once, twice, then stood up immediately. "Get me the owner on the phone," he said sharply. Within minutes, panic started building quietly behind the scenes, because the building next door, the empty space they had ignored for years, had just been purchased, and the new owner had requested a meeting with all neighboring business operators scheduled for the next morning. At 9 a.m., the staff didn't sleep well that night. Rumors spread in the restaurant. Nobody knew who bought it or why. But everyone felt a shift. The next morning arrived too fast at 9 a.m. sharp. The employees from Mason's Grill gathered in the conference room attached to the restaurant. The manager stood at the front, trying to maintain control. "This is probably just property management stuff," he said, trying to sound confident, but his voice didn't match his words. At exactly 9:03, the door opened, and the man from 2 nights ago walked in. Same calm expression, same steady pace. But this time everything changed, because now he wasn't a customer. He was the owner of the building next door. He placed a folder on the table, looked around the room, and spoke calmly. "I was here 2 nights ago." Silence. "I asked for a table," he continued, "and I was told you were fully booked." The manager shifted uncomfortably. The man opened the folder. "And yet I counted at least 8 empty seats." No one spoke. He continued, "I didn't come here for an apology. That caught attention. I came here because this place is going to change." The manager finally spoke. "Sir, if this is about a misunderstanding, it's not." The man interrupted gently but firmly. Then he looked around the room. "This isn't about one night. It's about a pattern." He turned a page in the folder. Photos, reports, customer feedback, anonymous complaints, staff behavior, documentation, everything carefully collected, not emotional, just factual. "You have a problem here," he said, "and you've had it for a long time." The room went completely silent. One server whispered something under their breath. The man heard it, but didn't react. Instead, he continued, "I'm not here to shut you down." That surprised them. "I'm here to rebuild this entire block." He explained his plan calmly: new training standards, new hiring policies, new management oversight, partnership opportunities for local workers, community integration programs, and accountability systems that didn't exist before. Every word landed heavier than the last. Because this wasn't revenge, it was restructuring. The manager looked stunned. "Why would you do all this?" The man paused, then answered honestly, Because I know what it feels like to walk into a place and be told without words that you don't belong. No anger, just truth. Weeks passed. Mason's Grill didn't close. It changed slowly. Staff were retrained, management replaced, policies rewritten, and something unexpected happened. Business improved, not just numbers, but reputation. People came not because of controversy, but because they sensed something different: fairness, consistency, respect. One afternoon, the same host who denied him that night was working a shift. He saw the man again, this time entering through the side office. No hesitation, no fear, just respect. The host lowered his head slightly. "I remember you," he said quietly. The man nodded. "I know." A pause. "I'm sorry," the host added. The man looked at him for a moment, then simply said, "Make it better for the next person," and walked on. No revenge speech. No humiliation, just a lesson that stayed longer than anger ever could. Months later, the block became known for something unexpected. A model of fair business practice in a place where reputation mattered more than image, and the story spread not as gossip, but as a reminder that sometimes the loudest response isn't anger, it's change. After the changes at Mason's Grill began to take effect, something unexpected started happening. The staff noticed it first. The atmosphere wasn't tense anymore. It was structured, clear, predictable in a way that removed fear from daily work. Schedules were fairer. Training sessions actually made sense now instead of being rushed or ignored. And slowly, even the most skeptical employees had to admit something had improved, but outside the restaurant. The story was growing in a completely different direction. Because someone had leaked it, not the business plan, not the ownership documents, but the original incident. The night a black man was denied a table despite empty seats. Within days, local blogs picked it up. Then larger pages, then news commentary channels. The headline wasn't about real estate anymore, it was about dignity and consequence. People online debated it heavily. Some called it karma, others called it calculated revenge. But what stood out most wasn't the ownership twist. It was the calmness of how it happened. No shouting, no public confrontation, just quiet action over time. Meanwhile, another restaurant across town was watching closely. A direct competitor. They had always seen Mason's Grill as their rival for premium customers. And now they saw something else: a vulnerability. Because reputation can shift faster than revenue. One of their managers said during a meeting, "If this spreads more, people will start comparing us to." That comment lingered in the room longer than anything else. Back at Mason's Grill, the original host was struggling more than anyone else, not because he was fired, but because he was still there, still working, still remembering. Every shift he replayed that moment, the quick judgment, the dismissive tone, the assumption, and now knowing who that man actually was made it worse in a way he couldn't explain. One evening he found himself cleaning the same entrance area. The door opened, and for a second his body froze. It was him again, the owner. But this time there was no tension, just movement. He walked in with a small team reviewing renovation plans. The host instinctively stepped aside, but the man stopped briefly, looked at him, and said nothing, just a short nod. Not approval, not punishment, just acknowledgement. And then walked past. That silence meant more than any confrontation, because it removed power from guilt and replaced it with responsibility. Weeks later, the restaurant held a staff-wide meeting. Not because of a problem, but because of expansion. The business was growing. New locations were being considered, new hiring programs were being introduced, and surprisingly, employees were being offered advancement opportunities that didn't exist before. The same manager who once panicked during the ownership reveal now stood in front of the team with a different tone. "This place isn't what it used to be," he admitted, "and that's a good thing." For the first time, no one argued. Even those who were unsure understood something fundamental had shifted. Respect was no longer optional. It was built into the structure now. Outside the restaurant, the original man was rarely seen in public headlines anymore. He wasn't chasing attention. He was building, quietly expanding into other properties, other locations, other partnerships, focused on fair business practices and local opportunity. But the story of Mason's Grill continued to follow him, not as revenge, but as an example. One afternoon, months later, a young employee approached him during a site visit. She looked nervous. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He nodded. She hesitated before speaking. "Did you plan all of that?" From the beginning, he understood exactly what she meant: the denial, the purchase, the restructuring, everything. He took a moment before answering. "I didn't plan to punish anyone," he said calmly. "I planned to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to the next person." That answer stayed with her, because it wasn't about ego, it was about prevention. Later that week, Mason's Grill officially launched its new training initiative focused on fairness, customer treatment, bias, awareness, and professional accountability. Some saw it as PR, but those inside knew it was structural, real, permanent. One evening, the original host finished his shift and stepped outside the street. It was quiet, the restaurant lights glowing behind him. He looked back at the building, not with resentment anymore, but with understanding. He wasn't the same person who worked there months ago, because now he understood something simple but heavy. Small decisions can shape large consequences. And silence in the moment doesn't always stay silent. Sometimes it grows into change. Inside the restaurant, lights dimmed slowly as closing time approached. The manager locked the doors and paused for a moment before leaving, looking at the sign above Mason's Grill. Same name, different place, and for the first time, a better one, and somewhere not far away. The man who once asked for a table was already building the next chapter quietly, one decision at a time.